10th, 2022 work session to order. We are discussing Lewis Road application site plan. And so please join in for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lauren,
Chair LaFaro.
present.
Vice Chair Finity.
He's going to be late by a half hour.
Okay. Secretary is here. Board Member Catalinato.
Present.
Board Member Mutu.
Present.
Board Member Neely.
Present.
Board Member Fulham.
Present.
We have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Great.
Next time.
Okay, so Claire, we'll turn this over to you.
Okay.
To
So what we're going to do today, if you remember at the last meeting, the planning board looked over the staff report for the subdivision application portion of it, which a lot of it overlaps, and especially with referrals. Anthony went through thoroughly the referrals that we received. A couple questions came up related to the town engineer, so he's given some time and he's here, so we can speak to him about some of the issues maybe the applicant has in terms of like working things out.
Can you introduce the town engineer?
Yes. Why don't you come up here and you can sit with us? This is Tom Houghton.
I saw you outside, but I didn't hear you.
Oh, yeah. I keep a low profile.
So do we.
Smart man.
Exactly. I meant to have actually his comments with us, and then we're going to get those in a couple minutes.
Welcome, Tom. So there are comments, is somebody bringing?
Yeah, we'll have a copy of them so we can look at them. But do you want to talk about the more of the larger issues? And of course, we can have the applicant address any things because we want to get this plan to a form that is approvable on both the subdivision and the site plan level. So that's where we're at. But here is the site plan. Hard copy of the application for you.
Well, do we want to,
Did it change from what you sent out a couple days ago?
Nope, not at all. But I just didn't know if you had hard copies, so that's why I wanted to give you one. Thank you. Perfect. Jackie's got one. Do you have a hard copy of the site plan?
Oh, actually, not.
Is it the same one?
Stafford, it is the same one.
But
from the-
I don't print it out if I get it online.
Gotcha. But I do, if you need to take notes, that's why.
so do you want to jump in procedurally this way, or do we want to pose some of our questions which may be engineering related?
Yeah, we could definitely do that.
I don't know, how does the rest of the board feel?
Well, I mean, if we have Tom for a limited amount of time,
We have you for
I'd
a
say
limited amount of time.
As much as you need me, but I do have things to get back
The
to.
busiest guy in town hall.
Yes, I testify to that.
Do you want me to do a
Yeah.
quick summary?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to start off, on September 23rd, I completed my review of the set of plans dated July 7th. Had a couple pages of comments. Found that a lot of it didn't conform with the standards of the highway manual. Made most of those comments. A lot of stuff was just like, it's a big set of plans, so there's percentages on slopes that didn't match that on the plans and invert elevations and all that stuff, so I made a bunch of comment on that.
Were those the latest plans that you were looking at?
At the time.
At the
So
time.
since then, I received a set of plans dated October 26th. I went back through my September comments. They addressed the majority of them. Really, the outstanding items have to do with some of the driveways for the houses that, like, golf carts only for parking in front of houses and stuff like that.
That was the public safety department also was questioning a lot of that stuff.
They did provide a number of vehicle paths that fire trucks and emergency vehicles could travel down to get to kind of the back parts of the property, like the concession stands and the sports courts. So they did find a way to be able to facilitate vehicle access in case emergencies back there. They addressed almost all of my drainage comments as far as manhole spacing, catch basin spacing, and decreasing the travel length of the stormwater in the gutter. So by picking it up more frequently in accordance with the highway manual at about 350 feet, you keep the volume of water in the road to a minimum while still allowing all that water to get to the drainage. So it makes the road more passable during a storm event. The really kind of the last item that they didn't address was just the fact that in these very, very large drainage areas and the areas that drain to the ponds, the highway manual asks for, we really only have provisions for recharge basins. Highway manual doesn't have provisions for ponds or drainage areas per se, but in areas over 8 acres, they ask for 5 inches of storm event, just to provide a greater measure of safety in the case that they do overflow, or there is a storm during intensely heavy rainfall, during frozen ground conditions when it won't percolate. They did not address that item or that comment that I made. On some of the ponds, there may be the capacity in that depression to begin with.
We don't know.
We don't know. And in some of the drainage areas, that may exist as well. It may be as simple as increasing the high water level in those areas, maybe making the pond a touch deeper. All that really should be looked at.
Calculated.
Especially since a number of these ponds are directly adjacent to housing or clubhouses or anything like that. The applicants did address my comment regarding overflow from those ponds. Initially, the overflow was directed through a catch basin, through a pipe, and outletted, basically bubbled out onto a roadway, which then traveled down like 1,300-foot road. It was, they've since moved that to the, I believe, the east side of the property, and it's going to basically bubble out onto the golf course, away from the roads, and really shouldn't cause much of an issue. I feel it's much safer.
So are they all shown on the site plan?
Yeah, so this,
Okay,
Tom
no, I
has
don't want
the,
you to.
has the revised one, we received that, we received it, sent it to him, we have new copies, that is October 26th is the new date on those plans. That has been uploaded into the box that you all have access to.
So, in effect, the October set of plans addressed the majority of my comments.
Okay. So I think, I have some questions of Tom.
Okay.
But and I think you sort of approached them. So I had a question, are the drainage swales, detention ponds, leaching pools shown on the site plan?
They are.
And are they adequate? This is a question we don't know.
Yes, the ones that are located outside of the development themselves, the DRAs, drainage reserve areas, they're really just part of the golf course construction, and then they outlined them to be self-contained units. They'll be fine, those out there. The ponds themselves, I feel that the additional drainage should be provided in those to meet the highway spec of the 5 inches of rainfall. So
Okay, so I had
those might need to be a little
I had a
bigger.
question on that, so
Yeah.
maybe you've just addressed it. So elaborate on the lined ponds and their protection for potential flooding, which is
So-
what you're saying.
Yeah.
The property is located in the flood hazard zone X designated by FEMA. Has that FEMA level been updated in any way?
I
In the
don't-
light of global warming?
I don't believe so.
Increased
and-
rainfall?
Yeah, the X zone is really anywhere outside of what really could be affected by flooding per se. So it wasn't something that I looked at in my review. I was looking at strictly at stormwater and not flooding from the ocean.
And you mentioned 5 inches now. This
5
is-
inches is for drainage areas over 8 acres, as depicted in the approved 2005 highway manual. There is a 2011 highway manual, but it was not accepted by the town board. So-
Okay. Engineering, those are my questions. Gloria, do you have any questions?
Well,
Or
the
anybody?
only question I had was really related to the Public Safety Department and their concerns about getting fire trucks and, and actually getting to the houses.
Great, yeah.
And there was a whole section on the gatehouse, guardhouse, whatever we want to call it, that they had questions about how it was going to be manned. So I don't know if, obviously, you've addressed a little bit of the access issue, but does this have to go back then to the, because they basically said they were not approving the application.
Yes, yes, we want their approval prior to any signature or on this plan. We'll make sure the plans get into a form that meet the code. So there's a fire code. So to your issue about access, we want all buildings to be accessible by a car or truck. fire trucks, because they're not gonna be little golf carts coming up to put the fire out on
Well,
these properties.
my
Or
understanding is-
ambulance.
Yeah, my understanding is right now, some of those houses can only be accessed by a golf cart.
Right, and some of that's been adjusted, but we, obviously, he's gotten the plans a couple days ago. We need to verify that, and then we need to then refer these plans to the fire marshal. They're gonna need to see the new plans, but it's a matter of us looking at the plans and making sure, like, yes, that does appear to meet their issues, and then referring it to the fire marshal.
Do we have Tom's report?
We do.
We have my September report, not
But not
my
the
one that
ones-
states
Yeah.
what's been addressed, what
Because
hasn't been
that,
addressed.
this, we received,
Well,
about a week ago.
Can we get copies of this?
Of the latest
Yeah,
reports?
Yeah, his
Yeah,
latest report.
yes, he hasn't prepared it yet,
It is
but
a,
this is
It's a
verbal.
red
That's
line
it, right
markup.
there.
Just zero
So you're
check.
definitely gonna get copies of it, he's
All
gonna
right,
prepare
because
it.
we need to be able to track it with our notes as well.
Right, exactly.
You could
I-
put that in the Dropbox file with,
Uh-huh.
right.
Oh, exactly, or I'll email it to you
Yeah,
as soon as I get it, because then it's easier. The Dropbox, you
easier.
have to go through if you're looking for something,
From
but,
the plans that I reviewed, they did address the majority of the access issues to the houses. Like they're providing driveways, they're providing paved paths that are 15 feet wide to get vehicles to those. But as far as the gatehouse, I can't really speak to that.
Okay.
And you're satisfied with the information that you'll be getting on these ponds? Because there are 2 ponds, right?
Yes, there's 2 ponds and they're actually linked by pipes. So
They are.
in fact, it's one large pond.
One large pond, right?
And they're lined ponds,
Correct.
okay. So, and what happens when they fill with water? Where are they pumped to?
Well, they're lined to a point. I believe the applicants could probably speak better to this, that
Okay.
the water taken from them is used to fertigate.
Right,
There is that overflow area, or that freeboard to provide for the storm drainage,
Mm.
which is, I think they're providing 3 feet in there. That's to be used for drainage from the surrounding area.
right.
And then in the case of an overflow, there are provisions for that where there's a double catch basin piped to another leaching pool, which then outlets onto the golf course and away from the housing.
Mhm.
So if no pumping occurs and a significant amount of rainfall comes down that exceeds the discharge capacity outside the freeboard, then it'll overflow onto the golf course.
Right.
But the overflow water is not fertigated. I mean, it's the nitrogen load in it is pretty high.
It should just be stormwater. So
Mhm.
it potentially would be mixed with whatever is pumped from the ground, but I can't speak well to the fertigation portion of this.
Well,
Maybe
in-
we can have,
Yeah, in theory, wouldn't the,
Good.
like, in a strong storm, with freshly fertilized greens and fairways, wouldn't that then run off and be caught into these ponds? And have the
Potentially.
nitrogen load,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit higher than it normally would be?
Potentially.
right, so this is an important question, I think.
yes, yeah,
So are you making a note, Claire?
I am.
Okay.
What's the design frequency that you're designing to for this in terms of, what, 100-year storm, 500-year storm?
We're using a 3-inch storm event,
But for
mostly
the,
to comply with the SWIP. As far as the intensity, we don't really look at intensity for the calculations. We really ask that they provide storage volume.
Why wouldn't you, given what's happening with our weather and increased rainfall and deluge that we're gonna get this weekend as well, why wouldn't you include that in your calculation?
Because we haven't updated any of our standards to take
Because you
into
haven't
account that.
updated any of the standards. Okay.
And
What
we're
does the
talking about the
town-
town road and drainage,
no,
Yes.
so-
or the state highway design? So it's the town road and drainage standards that you're
The site
referencing.
plan standards call for 3 inches. Subdivision standards call for 2 inches of storage. There's a Manning equation to determine like pipe size and all that in the highway manual, but
Right,
we use storage capacity for our drainage.
right, the town highway, I mean.
And town code.
Right, right.
So that it's the town code that needs updating to essentially accommodate these occurrences that are now happening.
Sure.
Okay, so we can make that recommendation, right?
What does the 2011 non-adopted
There's a
book
couple of
say?
nuances in there, a couple of details. It's not overly different
Okay.
from the original. Honestly, it gets updated to put somebody's name on top of it. So.
Right.
Yeah.
That was the last attempt?
What do you
2011?
think, George? This is something that needs to be updated.
Well, I guess the point I was asking for what kind of frequency that they're designed to, look, what's our goal is? Our goal to capture everything for a 500-year storm that happens once every, that we'll never see? You can design things so that you never have a flooding problem, but it's cost prohibitive. And that's why you gotta make that call. Once in 100 years, if that pond overflows and you get some of the runoff, which will be a lot of rainfall, freshwater rainfall mixed with some fertilizer, but if you get that runoff so infrequently, is it worth it saying, gee, you gotta provide this extra volume so that this never happens? There is that trade-off between what are we designing for and what are we prepared to make an applicant or the town. And don't forget, updating town standards also means that the town's got to follow those standards as well.
Yes.
Right? So at which point do we?
Well, they finally upped 2-inch rainfall to 3-inch,
Right, and
That
the-
took a long time.
I think one of the other points here, and the reason I was asking about the town road and drainage versus like a state highway, unless at a federal or state level, different standards have been adopted. To George's point, I'm not sure what we could exactly hold them to, unless there is some kind of adopted standard somewhere that is different than ours. I don't know.
And the thing with our drainage design and standards out here, where we're principally sand underneath, is that we call for storage. The calculation never take account of the fact that while water's flowing into that drainage pool, it's actually going out as well. A significant portion is going into the.
So we look
into
at the
sand.
worst case scenario, over time, if that pool does silt up, then there is still enough capacity
Yes.
for that site. To speak to the overflow, it is also going to a golf course that acts as a filter strip. So it's not in essence discharging directly to a water
I
body.
mean, it's good that
with
we
that
took it
fertilizer.
away, so it's not discharging down the road, which it shouldn't.
Yeah.
It shouldn't.
So we're going to another filter strip. Yeah, a maintained area has fertilizer to it, but
But do you think that that's the best system?
I think you absolutely have to have an overflow. And if there is an overflow on that site, I would like it directed to the golf course.
To the golf course?
Yes, away from residences, away from any roadways, because if that extra water ends up on that roadway, then the gutter may actually start to creep further and further towards the crown because of that road pitch being so long that you might not be able to drive up it in an event, which is probably a hurricane or something like that that's
Right.
causing
For
all that rainfall to
evacuation,
begin
right.
with. So, yeah, I think it's probably one of the best places to direct that water to in this case.
Yeah.
Can we
I
have
think
the
the applicant
applicant's
wants to-
comments to the punch list items that are remaining for you? Could we go over those?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we're talking about, are you still,
Does the
You said they
applicant have
addressed
these?
most
Do you
of
have
what
these
you,
questions
I
from
reviewed
Tom?
the plans, I didn't review any comments, so.
oh, you mean your but what's your?
No, your comments. So there was a few items as you were going through, you were saying, they addressed this, they mostly addressed that. So if we could have sort of the punch list of what's remaining
Oh, yeah,
to
that'll
address,
be
and
my
we could
revised
hear.
memo.
So should we wait
Which
to
is the 5
address it?
inches and the greater than 8 acres, right? That portion?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we should discuss it now.
Yeah.
Or wait until the report is completed. What's the protocol, Jackie?
Well, it's our
My
protocol,
manual?
We,
It was.
if Tom would like some answers, and we would like some answers, without eating up the clock,
Sure.
because we have a lot of
Have my
other stuff.
binder back?
Could you have your what?
Wayne,
No, I'm just looking for that section of the.
Oh, I'm
the
sure I
manual.
can find it for you.
yeah, you could ask too.
Yes.
I think it's the section on recharge basin design.
Sure.
Do you have it?
Yeah, what about?
What do you want
So,
about?
Where, what does it say, actually?
All stormwater recharge basins shall, I'll start from the beginning. Recharge basins shall be provided where there is no available outlet for stormwater or where, in the opinion of the town engineer, a potential drainage problem exists. In general, a tributary area of 8 acres or more shall be deemed to necessitate a stormwater recharge basin. In areas less than 8 acres, drainage facilities shall be installed as directed by the town engineer. So in essence, these ponds are not stormwater recharge
Recharge
basins.
basins. So,
Well,
so it might
our
work.
engineer is here, so they're designed at a
Will you just
5-inch.
identify yourself?
Yeah, Wayne Bruin, O'Shea Marcinsica Bruin for the applicant. Tom Dixon is here from Nelson Pope. And I think that as the board encouraged, Tom, it would be great if you could sit down with Mr. Dixon at some point and they could go through whatever may be outstanding. However, it's our understanding that standard is there as to determine when a formal recharge basin is required. We discussed this with the board at the last meeting. And the question here is, from day one, the design was not to have formal recharge basins, but to use these natural drainage areas, use overflow on the golf course, leaching pools, and the series of design that has been provided. So the question I'm hearing today is a little different, Tom, as you expressed it, is the capacity of the ponds. And I think you'll hear from Tom is the capacity of the ponds are designed with an overflow based on a 5-inch rainfall. So maybe that's something, rather than us lay people, let the engineers sort of review and make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, they can.
Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, you're right, Tom.
Madam Chair, may I, Vice Chair Finnerty has
Yeah, we're
arrived.
good.
Yes.
25 is .42.
Welcome.
Yeah, okay, so
Thank you.
I'll just introduce, so Tom Dixon with the firm Nelson and Pope. So, yeah, just to address, the ponds are sized for a 5-inch storage capacity. All of the other drainage reserve areas or dry well areas are sized for 3-inch. But there was some conversation back and forth about, you know, what intensity storm this is sized for, and, you know, those are volumes, right? So it's a 5-inch or a 3-inch storage volume, instantaneous. It's instantaneous that the rainfall falls, everything's immediately into these storage areas. It doesn't take into account that as they're going into these areas, it's also infiltrating back into the ground. So in addition to the town's requirements, we're also required to comply with the New York State SWIP requirements. So there's a stormwater manual there, and the requirements there do look at infiltration rates, and that requirement, that peak discharge requirement, is a 9-inch storm event, which is the 100-year storm. And the requirement is that the post-development stormwater system has to contain and bring it back to less than the pre-developed condition. So even in that 100-year storm event, the overflow condition has to be less than the pre-developed condition. And that's what our model in the SWIP shows. We model that, and it takes into the account the infiltration rates in these drainage reserve areas in that. So while the town's requirement is 3 inches, or we're providing 5 inches in the ponds, we are meeting the state requirement, which is based on 100-year storm intensity.
So just, I mean, I'm not an engineer, but I just
Sure.
want to be clear that you're saying the pond is in effect a recharge basin. And you read from the code that says
Well,
we should,
I stand corrected on the pond in that I overlooked that they did resize it to .42 feet, which is the 5 inches. So
Okay.
that is satisfactory to me.
so it functions as it, so we don't need a recharge?
Well, no,
Additional recharge basin?
when I referenced the recharge basin, I was never saying that they need a recharge basin. In that the pond is in effect a large storage device similar to a recharge basin, and based on that tributary area, that it should be designed to store a similar amount of water to that recharge basin. They've since updated it, and I overlooked item number 25, and they do have the same capacity.
Same capacity, so in
Yeah.
effect it is a pond/recharge basin.
Yeah, it's a line pond up to the, the standing water elevation, but during any storm event, it fills up, it has that 3 feet of freeboard before it would overflow, but the sidewalls, you could have infiltration in the sidewalls of the pond.
That 3 feet isn't
Yes.
lined.
Right.
Yeah, does it make sense to increase the elevation of the lining?
No, because then you wouldn't get the exfiltration.
You wouldn't get the filtration,
Yeah.
I see. So it's the unlined portion that,
So they're trying to
Just
maintain a pretty constant water level. It's probably better for the residents and everything. So that when the stormwater does come in, it'll come up, and then it'll slowly percolate out and go back down to the normal level.
just like helps with yards and all that kind of stuff. And then if it exceeds that 3 foot, it outlets to the overflow,
Right,
And that overflow mechanism is?
to the golf course.
To the golf course?
Yes.
Okay.
right.
And you say the ponds are integrated into the fertilization?
Tom can speak
System?
way better to that than I can.
Yeah, I'm not the fertilization expert, but yeah, they are, there's an irrigation system that, there's a pump house, and it draws water from the irrigation ponds to fertilize the golf course.
Okay.
Right, correct.
Um,
Okay. I was
Yeah.
gonna say, Brian's here from PW Grosser, and he can explain a little bit more, but my understanding is the concentration of nutrients or otherwise in the ponds is minimal, but everything is coming pipe there. But in addition, for the fertigation aspect, because there's the highly high nitrogen coming off the farmland, that we're also using that additional well and combining that and using that for fertigation.
Are they monitored, is that monitored within
Yes.
each pond?
Yes,
The
so
levels?
Brian Grogan with PW Grosser
You,
Consulting.
I don't want to keep him here
Sure.
longer, so I think we're getting into a different realm. So any more?
Okay,
time that you
The
here's
guys-
a
only other
question.
question that I had was, what I heard you mention about the house driveways, that they addressed that, and you said you couldn't speak to the clubhouse, so I was wondering if the engineer.
Gatehouse.
or The gate.
Gatehouse?
Yeah, the-
Gatehouse.
Gatehouse.
Or-
The chair said that public safety had specific comments as to how the gatehouse was going to be operated during
Okay,
an
I
emergency, and that's
Yeah.
not me.
Okay.
That's not you. Any other engineering questions?
Just the, and I don't know, Tom, if you had an opportunity to look, Ray Tobias had provided some comments on the new
I did
driveway.
not give him
Okay.
those comments, so
Okay.
I'm
All
trying to
right.
coordinate with everybody, and I miss everybody.
Okay.
But I will give it to him just to double check.
Right, and we could talk about it.
Yeah.
and-
Definitely.
If they did adjust the curb lines to the street, that'll be satisfactory to the highway department as far as not having curb lines along the edge of pavement, which plows might hit. They adjusted all of the drainage, providing satisfactory amount of catch basins, manholes, the like. It addressed, like I said, the majority of my comments, so.
Okay. And he will have the updated plans?
Yep, to include the redaction of my comment about the 5 inches, because we're good.
Yeah,
So-
so we'll need a copy of his revised comments, and he has what he needs, that's what I'm asking.
That's exactly
He has the
what,
revised
we want to
plan.
make sure he has what he needs,
Yep.
and I think he's telling us he
And we
does.
did have a name change on one of the streets, from Levan Way
Thank you.
to Punchbowl Lane, so.
I'll just speak briefly to that. So we did have some correspondence with the assessor's office, who also communicated with 911 and I think the fire department. And there was the one area where the road name was changing, but there was no intersection. So we decided to just not do that and kind of reduce the number of road names in development. So there was a change to that. But we did keep Punchbowl Lane, so.
Okay.
And these are not going into the town road system?
No, these are all
private
private
roads.
roads, yes, no dedication.
But
of the-
important that there's no doubles, because
Right,
people are still
right.
responding to them.
Taxes and emergency services and.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, yes.
Claire, I apologize for my late arrival. Has Tom been brought up to speed about, pertaining to our discussions about having on-site engineering retain outside firm?
Yes, we have spoken to Tom.
Okay.
And he can speak to it. We think that the best way to do it is RFP, right?
Yeah, probably either RFP or RFQ.
Okay.
It depends how long the project goes on. Potentially looking at using different firms for different phases. Some firms are better at inspecting drainage, and some firms are better at inspecting asphalt pavement, or in that case, we might bring on a testing company for the asphalt. something like
Right.
that. So
Well, and also your office would be interacting with whoever is on site, so.
my office would be directly supervising anybody on site.
Right,
So
they'd be
yes.
interacting, they'd be doing actually the field and, you know, reporting back to your office,
Yes.
along with the department.
As part of standard town site plans and subdivisions, we require inspections just about every step of the way.
Yeah,
From drainage installation to sub-base to RCA to pavement to final inspection. And a project of this size and my current staffing levels,
you'd be
yes.
overwhelmed. That was the thinking.
It wouldn't, it would be difficult to do the inspections to the level that the town requires.
Yeah, that was our concern, is make sure nothing you know, falls through, it gets,
Yeah,
falls through the
not
crack.
only for us, but for the developer as well,
Yeah.
so that there
Yeah.
are no questions.
Exactly. Good, good.
So when does that happen?
Well, we need a set of plans, right? The first, so the town.
You mean engineering?
Like, we need to have this approved by you first, obviously, before we can even start that process. So,
Okay.
Yeah, so, but.
This set of plans is immensely close to that. It's definitely something we can work with.
So everything that you've suggested and required are shown on these plans?
Yeah, there's a couple typos and stuff like that that I'll probably ask for to be addressed as comments, but I don't see anything that that I would reject these plans a second time, so.
Good.
We still need the SWIP updated as per this set with all the additional catch basins and stuff like that, but, yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, you have to stand, yeah.
Okay, we'll come back up. Yeah, so the model itself, well, we can talk
Yeah, model's
separately
fine.
offline on
Model's
this,
totally
but
fine.
yeah, I mean, it's fine. But the SWIP model itself really didn't change from that, you know, we added a lot more catch basins on there, so the plans themselves that are part of the SWIP would have to be included in that, but the actual model in there is still valid.
So that's fantastic.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Okay,
Great,
Thank you.
that's it, thank you very much,
information.
Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.
thanks, Tom.
You're welcome. Thanks for catching that one.
So how do you want to proceed?
Well, I thought going, your questions about the fertilizer, fertigation, the ponds, it kind of leads right into that. It's a big one. So that's related to, there's a groundwater management plan that's been submitted with this project, and it's called an ITHMP, which is really how they're going to operate and the fertilizer and the pesticides going on the golf course. Those are two plans you'll have to approve. They've provided the information, but I think, Brian, if you wanna, right?
Yeah, I
just-
can lead off.
Yeah, lead off with that and any questions you have of the applicant's expert here.
Okay, so Brian Grogan with PW Grosser. I also have Regina Bykow from PW Grosser here as well that may be able to help answer some of these questions. So the simple one I'll start off with is the ponds themselves are multi-purpose. As you heard Tom explain, they're handling stormwater runoff, but they are lined and they are part of our irrigation system for the overall golf course. So we have 2 irrigation wells on site that would pull water out of the aquifer and pump it to the pond itself. From the pond, there's another series of booster pumps that pull water out of the pond and distribute it out to the golf course itself. One of the irrigation wells is the one that was going to be located in the existing nitrogen plume coming from the adjacent farmland. So the goal for that was to be able to pull out some of the nitrates in the groundwater itself. That would get conveyed to the pond. It would be diluted in the pond by the other irrigation well as stormwater, because we need to get to a certain level of nitrates so you don't burn the grass. You can't just dump it unlimited, you'll burn it all up. So the pond acts as kind of a mixing scenario for that. So those wells are monitored. We'll know how much nitrates are in the pond itself because we want to control that number. We don't want it to go too high.
We have that number? That's going
I
to be in the
believe that's all,
report?
I think that's in the reports already. And I believe also some of the control methodology is in those irrigation designs as well as,
Are they?
In the groundwater monitoring
believe so.
plan, I get the mixed
it's
up.
between either that or the turf health management plan.
Turf health management plan.
There are things in there as well as I think some of the irrigation well design plans. There's also, items in there with relative to controls of how the system's gonna work. So that's really the crux of it, is that, yes, you will have some nitrates concentration in that irrigation pond as a whole, but that's because its primary goal is to get it back out to the golf course where it's utilized as fertilizer so that we had less direct application of fertilizer.
So you mentioned that there's a nitrogen plume in the
Correct.
adjacent pond that you're tapping into?
Yes.
Is that going to change the migration of the plume?
We've modeled that extensively during a lot of the SECRA work from years ago, and we actually did vertical profile tests on the property, found the plume as part of when we go to install this, we're gonna do another one to confirm that it hasn't moved. and pick up, to make sure we screen that well in the highest zone of that.
Is that the
But
Parlato property?
no, it's the farms to the north and west, I don't know exactly.
There's a Cracky.
Cracky?
Cracky.
Yeah.
Does Nesky?
Nesky.
That's all.
And the water authority, you know, has, at Spinney Road, has had, those nitrogen concentrations have, you know, you can see them in their wells, from the data that we looked at, you know, years ago. So there is definitely a plume there. We kind of confirmed it with our on-site testing. So that plume does exist.
Was that the result of nitrogen loading from the farm activities?
Correct. Basically, it's years of nitrogen loading on the farm, you know, from growing crops.
Are there examples of this type of treatment in other areas of the town or on Long Island?
I don't think so necessarily on the island with this respect. I mean, obviously, it's something that's similar in concept to what the town of Riverhead does for, I believe it's Indian Island, where they actually took a side stream off of their wastewater treatment plant, and then took that and irrigate the golf course with that after they filter it and disinfect it. But it's a similar concept to that. This is just using it as it's coming out of the groundwater. So it's something that we, you know, can be taken into consideration here.
I mean, it's an interesting concept I wasn't familiar with, but, so are there studies or how, is it a new?
It's not a new, no, it's widely utilized, and I think a lot of that information goes back to the secret, and it was widely utilized elsewhere in the country or you know, elsewhere. You know, it's just one of these things, if it's not something that always gets present to, you know, Southampton or Suffolk County, it's
Sure,
one of
of
those
course, yeah.
situations where it may not have been thought of, but it has been studied by other colleges, so, you know, Cornell Cooperative Extension, those kinds of situations where it is studied and looked at as a feasible method.
Yeah, my concern with that is if you did change the migration, if it could somehow, you know, impact surface water at some point, and then create algae bloom and.
No, I mean, it's already going, that existing plume is already going towards the surface waters. So it's already there. If it's not, it's basically already there.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is actually, we're gonna pull it out of the ground, lessen what's coming out of the plume.
Right.
Because the turf grass on the golf course itself uptakes 95+% of the nitrogen applied to it.
Yeah.
So we're actually using the golf course as a treatment methodology. So if anything, this project would reduce that nitrogen impact going to surface waters. And that's already there now.
Yeah.
And it's been there since those farms have been there, and they've probably been there
Yeah.
certainly longer than I've been alive.
Has the
So-
DEC been monitoring that plume?
It's not it's not like a plume as if in a Superfund site or something that DEC monitors, no.
Okay, just elevated.
It's elevated.
Levels of nitrogen.
Yep, nitrogen levels, correct.
I had asked at the last meeting, and maybe you could better answer, there was analysis in the documentation that talked about that now that the golf holes were moved, the fertigation analysis would have to be redone. So,
I mean, again, I don't think the physical location of a golf hole moving would have an impact on the overall fertigation system itself. I'm not exactly sure what the question was last time, but I don't see how that would correlate.
You mean the dispersion analysis?
Yeah, I had asked about the dispersion analysis to confirm whether that was done after the STP site had been moved by Central Pine Barrens. I don't know if that's been confirmed or
that
not.
was, yeah, okay, so with respect to the SDP, yes. We've redone the dispersion analysis and had further discussions with, say, the Suffolk County Water Authority regarding where the new SDP is located on the southwest corner of the property and their existing wells on Spinney. So those dispersion analysis were redone, the groundwater models were redone, and showed that the proposed SDP in its new location has no impact on Spinney Road.
So I guess
Well, it's
Gloria's
Weesup
question.
Creek that I think we were most concerned about.
So it was no impact on Spinney Road. Ultimately, everything will flow to Weesup Creek. And again, the treatment plant will achieve the standards required by the New York State DEC as well as Suffolk County Health Department for a treatment plant of 10 milligrams per liter or less. Again, I think it's important to note that this treatment plant is not required by the county code. If you look at the county's standards, this property could have been developed as of right. So with basically conventional septic systems on. That was a mitigating, factor that the client decided to implement. So as far as the county code was concerned, we could have built this with conventional systems.
What ultimately happens to the effluent from the treatment plant?
So this effluent is just a subsurface discharge, so back into leaching pools.
Is there any value, anything considered about pumping that back into the irrigation ponds as another
It's
source?
been talked about,
Because
again.
it is tertiary treated, right?
Correct, yes, so it could be, it's just a cost-benefit analysis of getting it back over there and adding additional steps, because again, the county, as part of Riverhead, required further filtration and disinfection.
Right.
That is not required if we were to do a subsurface discharge.
So, am I understanding that the exact location of the fertigation wells is not, you're saying are not necessary, or they are indicated on the site plan?
No, the irrigation wells are indicated on the site plan, and I don't believe those ever changed.
Did you say fertigation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fertigation wells are the ones to the north, you're trying to capture the
Well,
water.
there's one up, I believe it's in the middle of the driving range, which is shown on the site plan, and the
Okay.
other one is down near where the STP and admin building is down on the southwest corner of the property.
Okay, so those are the two fertigation wells.
Correct.
And
Okay.
to
And
be
that's on
clear-
the site plan?
Yes,
And to be clear, those are just, we call them fertigation wells, but they're really just wells that you're pumping water out.
correct.
One is in the plume and one is not in the plume,
Exactly.
and you're just filling the ponds with them. So
Correct.
there's no difference to.
No, they're basically an irrigation well. If we had not maybe done our homework and saw that there was a nitrate plume, we would be calling them irrigation wells.
And did you say that you've had extensive experience with fertigation?
The fertigation is a proven method. So again, it's not so much that this may be one of the first, I'll say, developments on the island that has used this technique, but it is not new to, the rest of the world.
Right, no, so we questioned it, and I remember in our early reviews, we questioned, in 2019, we reviewed fertigation, looked at it, tried to get some information on it.
No, I believe I spoke to it years ago. It
Mhm.
was definitely extensively studied as part of the overall.
Do you have something you could submit to us on that? I really would like to have some background on it.
Yeah, we can provide something
Okay,
if we haven't already.
good, thank you.
Yeah.
Just examples or some studies?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
some-
saying
and
there's
some
been some
science on
research
it,
studies
yeah,
on it
some-
would be
yeah,
helpful.
absolutely.
I mean, like Cape Cod would be a good
Right.
example, similar,
Right.
like aquifer
Yeah,
arrangement.
we'll
but-
find, we,
Yeah.
like I said, we'll
I'm
re-dig
new,
up.
so
No, that's fine, we'll
that's-
dig up
We should
the,
all
you.
know, Kate.
no,
All
we'll
of
dig it
us.
back up again. I know we did it. I know there was definitely documents submitted, so we'll find it and get it resent to everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, we can ask you some questions about water quality monitoring and all of that?
Sure.
Okay. During our review in 2019, we requested that a monitoring well be located at Weesup Creek. And I didn't see in any of these reports any of that that's happened. I don't know whether it was discussed with the applicant or by the applicant, but since that's the flow and the direction of the water, we wanted a monitoring
off-site,
well at
though?
Weesup
Yeah.
Creek.
Off-site?
That was mentioned in one of the reports,
Yes.
but I think it was off-site, and that was the
Oh,
issue.
yeah,
Well, so what do we do if it's off-site?
I don't know.
If pollutants are going into Weesup?
I see our council is shaking her head vigorously
All
no.
of this making it, well, I know we're not required to ask for off-site improvements.
No, it's not that you're not required, you're not permitted.
Well, it could be offered, right?
It could, anything could be offered.
Yeah, could be offered.
You could ask for it at the extreme eastern end of the property.
Yeah, maybe we're,
Yeah, how close
Okay.
is that, 1,500, 1,200 feet? What's the
But-
distance between the most eastern, George?
I think this.
The closest point to
The
Weesup.
southern point
The
and the
closest-
creek, is it 1,200 feet?
I don't know off the top
I-
of my head. It's,
I measured the STP at 3,000 feet from Weesuck, on
So
on
where
GIS.
that property boundary meets Lewis Road, what's that distance? That's about halfway to Weesup Creek, or?
Lewis Road is to the west, right? So east,
I'm sorry, not.
the southern tip on
The
the south,
southern tip.
southeast
By the railroad
tip.
tracks, by the railroad.
By the railroad tracks is probably the closest point, and roughly, I think you're, that number sounds about right.
1,200?
Is there a?
But I mean, we'd have to measure it, but it's,
Would you consider a monitoring well that, at
I
that
think, but
location,
well,
and it's
in
on site,
the
George?
monitoring plan itself, includes a series of wells on our property. And the goal of that monitoring plan is to study what is being, I'll say, the background coming onto the site, and then our site itself, and maybe whatever impacts are being, I'll say, from our site. So I think the monitoring plan in place on the property kind of suffices for that, because we'll know what's, I'll say, coming off of the proposed
This is
development
an
of the golf
extra
course.
level, this is an extra level of testing and monitoring, which I think is important.
But I think the question is what are you monitoring? So
We're monitoring
you just
any
try to
nitrogen
describe the
runoff.
distance, but you're talking about several properties and other things in between. So there's a current, you go test, put a well in near Weesuck Creek, and you'll get whatever readings they are, but they're not gonna be dispositive of anything that comes off of our property. So what are we monitoring?
What's the southernmost portion of where you could put a well in? That
Well, I
would
think
be
that's what we're
guaranteed.
talking about, is in the southeast corner of our property, there is a
Okay.
monitoring well on our property, so that
That's
is.
right.
Well, let's get with
Brian
That's
just
exactly,
said
that's
is-
exactly what we're saying.
Yeah,
Well, that's already
but that's not Weesuck Creek.
It's not
No,
planned,
so we couldn't ask for something.
Offsite.
Offsite.
But we
we're
can
saying that
ask for
maybe-
something
Maybe
on-site.
something, and again, it's difficult to see on those wide-scale plans what.
I think
way
we're
things
hearing
are.
that's, could you repeat that? Is
I
that
believe
part
that's
of?
already part of the monitoring plan.
So we-
Is it?
Locate where
Yeah.
the wells are.
Do we know where all those monitoring wells are on the site plan?
It's just,
Yes.
I noted in my notes here, there's gonna be a total of 14 monitoring wells and 9 lysimeters, is that correct?
Hi, I'm Regina Bykov with PW Grosser Consulting. It's a series of, I believe there's 3 background wells to monitor the flow onto the site, and then there's a series of, I believe, 9 additional groundwater monitoring wells located throughout the site to monitor, what's happening on the site as well as what's leaving the site. We
So
also
is that a
have,
total of 14?
I believe it's 14. Yeah. And then 2 STP wells to monitor the effluent at the STP.
And two monitoring wells for the STP?
Yes.
In addition?
Yes.
Okay.
Where does that data go, just for my own awareness? Is it self-monitoring, or do you have to report that to?
So the monitoring?
Yeah.
We have one consultant, right?
You were gonna hire a consultant, the town's gonna hire a consultant. It's just like 2 previous golf
Yeah,
courses that
Sivonic and-
we're currently and perpetually
Okay.
monitoring.
Got a name in mind.
We will do the same protocol. So we
Okay.
have that all written up, and I'm just gonna put a new name on top of it.
Thank you.
And we have a groundwater monitoring plan, which you have for review, and it
Do we
talks
have
about
that?
the frequency of sampling and what we're going to be
We do.
sampling for.
Okay.
So it's all included in that
It's part of this
plan.
packet, it's the last thing, the groundwater monitoring plan,
Okay.
but there is that version in the Dropbox.
I don't think you've handed that out. I have one copy, but you didn't hand that out. I just got it.
That's the groundwater monitoring plan, but does that have the map? Oh, let's look at the map.
The last page has the
One of
graphic
the
that I
maps.
brought to the last meeting.
Portion of the maps, the southerly portion. You can see we have one groundwater monitoring well here and one here. So the point is, groundwater is this way.
Yep.
So this will pick up anything.
Is that
going off.
the most southern point
This is the most southern.
of your development?
Southwest.
The groundwater is going this way. So we're trying to, that's the most furthest from development.
And it would be helpful, because, this STP is about like here.
If you go back, Wayne, there's an overall page from.
I got it, it's right there.
Anthony, I think, is pulling up a bigger map. So the STP is down here.
Yeah, but does it
The
show?
the well is here.
Well, there's a number of wells. So there's a well here for the actual golf course itself. And then the STP has its separate wells over here, as well as, again, they're interspersed throughout the entire development. But that's also on the plan that's in the groundwater monitoring
Okay.
plan.
He's got it
There's an
up there.
overall site plan with all of the monitoring wells on it.
So there are 16 monitoring wells all told. 14 wells on the site and 2 by the STP.
14.
14 total.
Yeah.
With the 2.
So it's 12 and
Yes.
2. 14 altogether.
An obvious question is, this is now our 3rd golf course with monitoring wells. An obvious question would be, has the other two, one of them has been under observation for 15 years. Do we have any data as the nitrogen?
We do. We do have
Has there
data.
been spikes in nitrogen?
I think
There's
off
a
of
lot-
the bridge had a
there's-
spike, yeah.
There's a lot of, Janice would be the most
Oh, okay.
intelligent, because
Yeah.
she's the one who gets the reports on a quarterly basis. But maybe they can speak to that.
I want to say how successful the town's program for both the bridge, and there's periodic review of that every 5 years to upgrade, and I've been involved with Sabonic all along, as you know. I want to tell you the sensitivity of the testing. Remember that they had the US Open there in 2013. Approximately early in the spring or the fall, they were upgrading some of the tee boxes in preparation of that. And one near the 14th hole on Sabonic, and there's a groundwater monitoring well right nearby. What a chemical appeared in monitoring that was related to some sort of, what was it, pesticide or herbicide or something, Mark? And we found out it's not something that was used on the course, but it came up. And what we found out, it was in the sod that apparently didn't come from Long Island, it came from New Jersey where they're allowed to use it. But that was the sensitivity, and of course, it triggered all sorts of protocols to make that disappear. But it was amazing how what could be found and brought up. But I think what the monitoring has done, it's proven the case that on golf courses now, not those from 50 years ago, that the protocols and fertilization and use of, is that they're so sensitive, and as was indicated, like the nutrients 95 uptake, and it's not just keep throwing fertilizer to keep it green. So what has been found is the nitrogen levels are not exceeding any of the standards, and actually the lining of the greens probably is, in the tee boxes is probably not necessary. But nonetheless, that's the protocol. We're going to follow that here. And again, I think you need to, you can go back to staff, and they've been constantly, to the point where it was quarterly monitoring. And I think on both the bridge, it's now only twice a year that they do that because of the success. You know, you're talking how many years that's been occurring, so.
So I have a question, I don't know who's responding to the.
It depends on what you're asking.
Okay.
There's like a couple players.
On page 8 of this secret report,
Okay.
your November 10th report,
Okay.
it says, if higher nitrogen levels are calculated, then the southern legs of the fairways of the golf course may be relocated to the central and western portions of the property. Has this alternative been taken into consideration and delineated on the site plan? Page 8.
Right, so that was based upon your findings, statements at the 2019. And since then, obviously, the project's been redesigned to, there's been pulled away slightly from the south. I would describe the golf course. It's probably better if you saw the overlay from the previous to what the
Where, do we have any
golf course.
visuals?
So, but at the end of the day, they ran the numbers, and they still are, the dispersion analysis and the groundwater management plan still says the amounts of nitrogen are lower. So it's not something
No,
that's
but I
recommended.
understand that, but I'm just reading through the language that's in the report, and so it bumped out to me, and since we're talking about it,
Yeah.
I wanted to get some explanation, other than we don't see anything. Do you have an overlay here?
Hold on, I'm trying to
Jackie,
find
what paragraph are you
I'm
at?
not seeing it on page
So
8.
this is,
That's the
Page 10
big
of
dot.
now it's the big plan.
The
We're
big-
going to the secret analysis, which is good. So a lot of this
Wrap
is
up
part
the
of that.
relocation plan.
Just one with the highlight, oh, you have the highlights, okay.
Is this different than what I have?
That's a no, you have a secret analysis, yeah, that's what you have. So anybody who doesn't have a secret analysis.
That's the one you emailed.
It's number
over, right?
1,
That's what I
and
emailed.
it's in that
You have it?
first number 1.
On page 8?
On page 8.
There's second paragraph, item 1.
So this is, the purpose of this meeting is for questions? These are the questions.
Thank you.
I have the, just so you know, I do have the comparison.
Oh, boy.
here For what was approved and what's changed.
How are we supposed to read this?
Binoculars.
Well, in any case, it does show
Right.
where
Binoculars.
some of the lots were reshifted, as you can see from here.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this many times. It's so small, and not detailed enough.
So, we have an outstanding question.
What about that plan that you showed me, Claire, for the Pine Barrens? Does that map
Yes.
show anything?
Let's see if this helps.
What are we asking right
On page 8, I don't know, I haven't figured it out yet. I figured it out.
Is this a good plan for the overlay? Yeah. Okay. Well, no, that's overlaying from Pine Barrens to now. That's not.
That's what?
Anthony, can you go back to the preliminary? There. So you can see.
Jessica, if you just leave mine. Sure. You can either,
Hi, Jessica Insulaco.
yes. You actually have to stand.
Excuse me?
Stay
Stay
there.
Yeah.
Stay
And your
Sorry,
name
hard to
is?
do. Jessica Insulaco. So if you look up at the golf up on the
You could put
top
the same
here,
thing across
or
there.
there, thanks. If you see the red arrow that says out parcels, kind of pointing to the out parcels over there, just above that, you can see how the golf holes in the preliminary were all closer to the eastern line, and they were all on the east side of the out parcels. One of the requests you made in your preliminary approval was to consider shifting them closer to the west. So then if you, Anthony, please, thank you, go to the next. There you go. So now you can see that the golf holes got shifted to the west. So they're on either side of the out parcels now. And the golf is closer to the out parcels, and then there's home sites now closer to the property line, if that makes sense.
Was that the relocation requested by the Pine Barrens Commission?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And then but it also did what you had requested as well. So both were satisfied by that move. Hope that helps.
So you see where I'm
Yep.
talking about, right?
Yes, exactly.
So are these still referred to as the southern legs of the course?
Yes.
Yes. So if the higher levels of nitrogen are detected in this area, they could be relocated to the central and western portions of the property. But where would you do that? I mean, where would you move them?
When that is based upon and you're gonna need an expert up here, because I'm not an expert in dispersion analysis. They ran the numbers and they did not find elevated nitrogen, and so they did not feel they had to do this, but they did it anyways.
When you say they, that's the Pine Barrens Commission, right?
No,
No,
the
applicant.
the
Applicant.
applicant after the dispersion analysis was completed.
Right, so it was your recommendation to look at this? And if it was higher nitrogen, to totally relocate it or find another location. But what we did is, we did the analysis that was necessary, but in addition, Pine Barrens asked for the shift. But as Jessica just indicated, the recommendation that was coming from you is if there was higher nitrogen, which it wasn't in the initial, but we did the study and the dispersion analysis, you wanted us to shift the golf holes further to the west. And as Jessica just indicated, we did. We shifted those. The only change that came after that was when the Pine Barrens said, take those certain number of lots and shift them down to the southeast. Now, those house lots are all connected to sewers and everything else, so that was all part of the nitrogen dispersion analysis, and it's still
And we have
below
that.
the standards.
Your consultant submitted that.
Yes.
And the mitigation was, just to be clear in my mind, of reducing nitrogen and also preserving more of the core on that left side of the map. Is that correct?
Well, it's not core,
Or the-
but.
I'm sorry.
I think the theory was, there was a question, at least in the planning board's mind at that time, that the location of the golf holes in that area would have the potential of having nitrogen closer towards Weesuck Creek.
Correct.
So it
Correct.
was, if there was an Indian analysis showing that, then we would shift them further to the west. So we did shift the golf holes further to the west.
Okay. And the Pine Barrens recommendation was so that, what-
Their
you tell me.
recommendation is, if you look at the lots in the center there, that's an area that has some steeper slopes.
Okay, thank you.
So they were looking to, even though they were, it wasn't all steep slopes, and it would have met standards, in at least the building lots. They had recommended we shift those to an area, and it's much flatter, less steep slopes on the southern portion, so that's why that was done.
Okay, thank you.
So we have the integrated turf health management plan on file, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So, who is you, right? You're the person for this.
You.
So the project is limited to 15% fertilization, correct?
Correct.
So by calculation, 62 acres are for the golf course, is that correct? And 29 acres for lots and common areas?
Yes.
Okay, so that's 91 acres. And on page 6 of this report, it says limited to 88.26.
Yeah, so the overall acreage of the entire development has increased over the years.
Has increased.
Correct.
Okay, I have a bunch of those questions about details to clean up our reports, because in all of our reports, we have different acres, different lots, and it's very confusing for the board. So I'll get to that, but I just wanted
Okay.
to double check. So, because the acres have changed, the fertilization remains at 15%
Correct.
all over, okay. And we have the integrated turf health management plan. Maybe I'll ask those basic questions now. Should I ask you
Sure.
some of those basic questions? What is the acreage of the Pine Barrens core here? The core?
So basically, everything north of the sunrise is.
I know
core,
where it
And everything
is.
1,000 feet south of the sunrise.
I know, what's the acreage?
You'd have to go back.
Okay, so can you provide that to us? And you listed the development rights from the core.
We clustered all our development.
Wayne, I'm
from-
sorry, you're gonna have to.
Oh, I'm sorry, Wayne, yeah,
If you're
definitely.
answering, this is your turn.
Yeah. So, as a normal cluster, we clustered out of the core,
Right?
as both Pine Barrens and this board wants us to. We took the yield from the core area and put it in the compatible growth area.
So you took the development rights out of Pine Barrens and you put them into the area that you wanted to
Out
develop?
of the core into the compatible growth area.
Right.
Because the whole property is in the Pine Barrens overlay district.
Right, but there's an area that's
Core
the
and
core, and
compatible growth area.
nowhere could I find the exact acreage of that, because the overall site is now what, 608 acres? No, it's changed,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
607.
608.8 acres?
0.87.
So that we can be on the same page, what's the acreage?
607.87.
607.87, okay, and that's 178 tax parcels?
That's what I counted.
Okay.
I was wondering if it changed.
Is that for you?
I don't know that exact number.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
you have to speak at the.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
And the reason I'm asking all of
Okay.
these, which may sound pretty basic, is that we have different numbers.
everywhere.
And when we're trying to calculate stuff, it's extremely difficult for us. So, it's 607.87 acres, that were established. I have 178 tax parcels.
I'd like to confirm that.
Okay, and then the ZBA, in their report, they talk about 591 acres.
It was a different project at that time, they added
It
acreage.
was less acreage. Right at the beginning, when we walked in the door here, we told you that we acquired additional acreage, including the Timperman Park parcel, 11-some acres. The thing we
Which one
didn't-
is that, Wayne, Timperman?
So on the Parlato property, there was a described property embedded in between all the old file map lots.
Right, the Parlato piece, right.
Right, and on that tract, there was approximately 11-acre parcel owned by the Timperman family,
Oh,
and
so
we
you-
acquired that,
okay.
and we added it to the lands, but we did not take any yield off of that.
You didn't,
No, we didn't add to our development yield,
okay.
but we're including it as our open space.
So that the 11 acre or the whole Parlato piece?
All the Parlato will be open space, except for the parcel we're dedicating to the Water Authority.
Okay, so we, at the time that we talked about the Parlato 2019, we talked about the fact that there had been a lot of toxic chemicals in it because it had been farmed. And that if you were going to turn it over to the town, was there any kind of remediation that was going to be done? So that's a question I have.
So we have no evidence of toxic materials. There was a portion of the Parlato property that was once farmed
Mhm.
many decades ago, which has reverted to natural vegetation. And both the Pine Barrens and this board had required us to leave that in its natural state.
So there's been no remediation or anything of that?
Remediation of what?
Well, just to do at least an environmental assessment of
I
that
believe
parcel?
that was done. It was done, and there was nothing that
And it's in, that's in the.
rose to the level.
We have that in the record?
I believe so.
You should have it, if not, we'll get you a copy. Yes, it
In addition, the Water Authority's doing their own testing as far as water quality there for their parcel.
Is that where their parcel is going to be, the 4-acre parcel?
Exactly.
Okay, so that's another question that I have. I'm sorry, does?
This
is useful.
No,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Going.
I have spent
Yeah.
days
Yeah.
on
And I
this.
mean,
Okay, go ahead.
if I
Go
can
ahead.
just
Yeah.
interject while you're talking about this, I'm looking at this draft staff report, November 10th, and it says that this application is in the compatible growth area. Isn't it in both?
Yes, but the portion, the
But-
site plan is occurring only in compatible growth area. Site plan's not doing anything in the core. The subdivision is subdividing portions in the, property and
But I-
transferring the rights.
I believe what's
That's
confusing
just the
is
site plan.
if you were to deduct the core acreage from the overall acres, then we know how many acres are being developed. That's been a confusing
Well,
issue,
we know how many acres are being developed, yes.
and that is?
So the acreage of the subdivision plus the site plan areas? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
So it's about 433 acres of open space. So it's 607 minus 433.
Wait a minute, me, my brain
I
is.
What is
can't
it?
do it. I can't do it.
The engineer.
174.
What is it, George?
174.
I have to take my socks off.
Jessica Insulaco. We've provided all of that on the compliance maps that show CLUP and APOD and PRD compliance. The total developed area is right about 170 acres, which includes previously cleared area.
170.
Whatever the total he's got listed, it's right there on the map.
So that comes to 603 acres.
Well, it's 607.87 minus the 171.
The 4 acres for the Suffolk County Water Authority. So that's being extracted?
That's being dedicated out of our 35% development area. So
Okay.
if you look at the property, 65% is going to be dedicated open space, either homeowners association conservation easement or being deeded to the town. In addition, clearing-wise, on our 35%, we have our development, which is the housing and the golf course, and the 4 acres going to the water authority out of the 35% that we're allowed to develop. And overall, we have 75% remaining in its natural state.
So it says you retain 20 lots in open space?
20, so we're required to show parcels, reserved parcels, so I don't know what you're reading, but there are parcels, reserved parcels, we call them reserved parcels, because they're not building lots. So some are open space parcels, some are our homeowners association, which will be the sewage treatment parcel, there'll be a parcel for the maintenance, there'll be a parcel for the recreation, there'll be parcels, the golf course, because among other things, this is split by Spinney Road, there'll be separate parcels.
But they're lots, but not for open space, though. I mean,
Correct.
they're not open space. It's just 20 lots.
I don't know what you're reading.
Applicant
So-
retains 20 reserved lots in open space. I'm reading from your report.
Okay, which report? My report?
Mm-hmm.
What page?
I don't have a page reference.
I have pages on every.
So,
Yeah,
which,
there are
what
page
may be
numbers on the
referred to, there are portions of the property which we have shown, as I indicated, which will be reserved parcels. The property to the north, as you can see, split by Spinney Road and so on and so forth, they're separate parcels, but they're all gonna be deeded to the town. Similarly, over here, there's gonna be a parcel or
Yeah,
parcels.
I counted them, the 20 lots are open space, yes,
Right.
that are going to be open space parcels.
That's
Yes.
where I got it from.
Yes.
So it's all delineated on the site plan. That's what
It's
I
all
wanted to know.
delineated on this subdivision
Subdivision
plan.
map.
On the subdivision plan.
Yes.
Okay.
And Claire, going back to the earlier paperwork,
Okay.
and the site, with the subdivision is also saying it's only in the compatible growth area.
Well, then that's not true, because obviously the open space parcels will be in the,
Right.
yeah, yep, definitely.
Okay.
I thought I had seen that everywhere. but
Yeah, no
we'll
problem.
Go back to.
No, we want to be clear,
my
so
old
that's good.
stuff.
Can we talk a little bit about the water? Wayne, do you want to talk about the Suffolk County parcel?
Excuse me, this is part of your submission, if you haven't seen it, but this is just to illustrate what is becoming open space. So everything's shaded in the question of disposition.
The blue?
So, this, whatever, orange or brown or whatever, is all being dedicated to the town.
Right.
The yellow is the water authority, and the
Right.
blue is conservation easement.
Open,
Open
those are the open
space.
space lots, the blue.
Homeowners Association
that's-
will retain that.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
That's helpful. So the tan is all
Dedicated,
dedicated.
right?
The blue is in the homeowners association
Open space lots.
Yep,
with conservation easements.
correct.
And the white is everything that's being developed.
Correct, and one of the things we originally, one of our first submissions, and staff asked us to, so we originally were gonna not, it gets confusing, just like you said, when you say lots. So we had just large lots with golf course on it, and we had conservation easements over the portions that weren't gonna be, so the staff actually asked us, can we create all separate lots for the open space? So that's where the 20
That's the
comes up.
178 tax
That's-
parcels?
No, that's the original tax parcels, but the 20 open space lots comes as a result of staff asking us to put all the open space in separate reserved parcels.
Okay.
So you're taking a whole bunch of little tax maps, bringing everything into one big, and then separating it back out.
Oh, yeah, they're all in
So-
ownership. When you say 178 tax parcels, they're all in our ownership or affiliates. You know, like all the Parlato were originally Parlato family, and they had them all single and separate. We maintained them all single and separate. At some point, all that will end up being deeded to the town.
Well, that's what
By
I'm
all
saying,
the entities.
you're taking all these individuals, basically in the subdivision, bringing them all together and then subdividing them a second time differently based on
Well, they
how-
weren't necessarily all subdivided the first time around, so they're just tax parcels that were acquired at perhaps different times, and they were always separately taxed, but they're all in the same ownership, so they're accumulated, so. Sorry.
You have to go by the microphone.
Your mic on the table.
wherever.
Yeah.
That one.
So, and you have ownership over all of those? Because did I not
Absolutely.
hear that there was some?
Absolutely.
That
All
was questionable
600.
ownership?
orange ones, they don't own.
Right.
And so how?
That's the old file map area that you got.
That's the old file map that goes through the center, which we own 95% of that map. It goes all the way to the Sunrise Highway. And you can see part of this is we're abandoning all that portion of the map. The same thing on Parlato. And the parcels that we don't own are left with paper street access. They're old file map lots that are all not developable under your old file map regulations, and many of those are owned by the county.
So has there
Because
ever
it's-
been an old file map opened by the town to
No.
look at those?
No.
Should there be?
Which ones?
No, you're not opening the map.
The ones that where the land's being transferred from?
No.
No,
Credits?
those,
Correct.
they are,
No.
and the town doesn't think that's necessary in terms of
No,
ownership?
in most likely those cases, some of them are owned by the county, so they're not gonna be developed.
Because of.
Why, do they say that to us? Do we have something on record
They're in the nature preserve.
that says, you know, these are Suffolk County tax lots and they go to you? or
They're
to-
designated open space when you look them up. They're
So,
good.
but do
Yeah.
all I'm saying is that we have an instance going on right now where 10 years ago, people thought that there was an easement on a piece of property and it wasn't ever filed. And now there's a mess. So,
Even if the county were to turn around and, notwithstanding that they put these in nature preserve by resolution in reference to tax map numbers, but even if that was to be reversed and they were to turn around and put them out to auction, they would still be subject to your old file map regulations, and they're not large enough. This is CR 200 zone, and none of them are large enough, 30,000, for you to even consider as a development parcel. So even if you were to sit here and evaluate that map, you would probably say, given the ownership pattern and everything else, that this shouldn't be open for development, these should all be sending parcels. Now, to that extent, you already did this with one of the parcels. You did it with 67, it is 57 spinning, whatever it was an old file map.
where in there, somewhere in the mix of this?
Yes. And you actually authorized an abandonment of portion of Smith Avenue, and then.
I did?
Yes, and then the town,
I have no recollection.
Dave Wilcox, I believe, issued development rights certificate for it.
To call Jackie back up, but it's recent.
But that's
Yeah, about a
part
year or
of
so
your,
ago.
well, it's not a part of the determination you have to make now. They're not abandoning any of those roads associated with those lots. They can have access. If you
But-
decide there should be access, they can. But most likely, as you design them now, they're too small, they don't have the 30,000, which is what you'd need to do old file map, and so they would not, they'd
I
be sending
understand, but there
parcels.
has to be some findings and explanation of what you just said
Mhm.
in this document.
Okay.
Because they run right down the middle of this property.
Okay, we're gonna describe every single one, and then we're gonna
But
say.
the road system is being designed that if anybody decides to take a stab at it, that they have access to these properties. All of your abandonments and everything is still
Yeah,
leaving
they
the
would
old
have
file
to
map.
open a paper road and run
Right.
utilities
So
and the
that's,
whole
you
9
know,
yards,
that's-
which.
It's really
could be
a
whatever
discussion
it is.
for the future if somebody decide, I mean, we're not gonna go to the trouble of opening an old file map.
So the other thing I would tell you
No,
is, for the
I-
last 15 years, our client has been trying to find the owners of these properties, other than the county.
Oh, you have to stand again to the.
And,
We need-
and
we
and
need
what we
lapel
found,
maps,
we
right?
did title
Yeah, yeah,
reports.
right.
There's 9 parcels privately owned. And of those, we did title reports on all of them, and the title on pretty much all of them are so clouded. One we found had 3 siblings who one has passed, and there's family members, and, you know, we tried to buy, and they can't get their family members together and figure it out. There's now 27 people, heirs, and so on. But, I mean, that's just an example. But nonetheless,
Nonetheless, it's smack in the middle of a golf course, you know?
yeah.
It becomes valuable at some point. So I just am requesting that there be some documentation of this in our record.
Yeah, I mean, we
Yeah.
expect you to, and we have submitted proposed abandonment maps, not only here but abandonment on the Parlato property, and that will be an action part of your decision. Because the county and the state law require that you can't file a subdivision map on top of another subdivision map. You have to abandon the underlying map first.
Right.
So, in terms of the level of detail that's needed in the report for Claire, is it adequate to say, you know, these lots, you know, Suffolk County tax map lots, blah, 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 whatever, it's all included in that salmon color area? were researched and resolutions exist for each that designate by the county that they're open space? Is that,
At least the ones for county.
you know, like
Yes,
what you're
there's a-
looking for to include?
There's a portion that are county and then portion that is privately
Some
owned,
that
not
are
the 9
privately.
he's speaking about. So, it's some language to the effect that they would be subject to your full review from Old File Map. As designed right now, they don't have sufficient access and infrastructure, and we'd recommend that they are sending parcels because they're under 30,000 square feet. I mean, I think that's how you summarize it, but developing anything more.
Well, you have numbers on those tax maps? Do you have
Yeah,
numbers
they're
on them?
absolutely, they're on the
Yes.
plans, they show us out parcels. We've also provided the abandonment maps that show and label the ownership and the tax map numbers.
Okay, so Claire, you can include that.
I can.
I think it's part of, actually,
Yeah.
part of the subdivision approval. the
Yeah, he's
abandonment.
narrating it. I'm
Yeah.
gonna give him the
We're
job.
Yeah.
trying to get our arms
I
around
know.
this, you know? Wayne, while you're there, let's talk about the Suffolk County well. So when we looked at this way back, I believe this came from Suffolk County, because that's when the well was part of the PDD issue. And they wanted a new well field. And from the charts that were then submitted, the entire project was projected to use 50 trillion gallons of water between residences, golf course, and recreational areas.
Did you say trillion with a T?
With a T.
Thank you.
So currently, the Suffolk County Water Authority has 3 supply wells installed. Wells 1 and 2 are screened in the upper glacial aquifer, and well 3 is screened in the Magathy aquifer. So if the 4-acre offer is off the table, how will the Suffolk County Water expect potable water to be provided to the project without an adverse impact on their overall system? So, that's a question.
So I don't know what documentation you're,
In 2019, there was some documentation, I
right,
think,
that's
from the PDD.
information from the water authority since. And if you recall, going back to the PDD, it was something that was suggested as a community benefit, a
Right.
future well field, and it was always designed to be, actually, if you follow Spinney Road, somewhere in the northerly side of where our golf holes were, was to be where that well field was. And that's the way our plans were designed. Since then, the Water Authority reviewed this and said two things. One is they can supply the water for this project with the existing system, subject to necessary pumps and so on and so forth. However, they still want the future well site, but they wanted that well site over on the Parlato property. This was based on the request of the Water Authority to put it on the Parlato property.
Which
And
does
you have
not-
correspondence to that effect.
Yeah, I know, but I'm thinking Parlato property, we don't have any kind of an environmental assessment form on that property. Go ahead, sorry.
So they asked for it there.
For there.
And so we provided it for there. We have, we're working right now with the Water Authority on contracts as required by this board. One of the contracts is related to the dedication of this land and their ability to test the water there to make sure that they have good quality water, which everyone expects there to be.
I think prior, it was mentioned, and maybe you could send this over, I think you had said that there was a report from the Parlato property, is that correct?
Yes, that's part of the record. yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
We can make sure you get a copy.
Yeah, we want all of this stuff in the record, you know,
Well,
all
it's
of this
there.
documentation.
It's there. It's
I
bringing
know,
it to
but-
your attention where it's located.
Okay, but you have a report on the Parlato property, yes?
It's part of the entire environmental
So-
impacts analysis
look at that.
from day one and
Okay.
each update that we've provided along the way.
So they're not, so the Suffolk County Water Authority is not gonna put in the well now, they just want land for an additional wellhead, and they say that they can supply
Absolutely. yeah.
enough water for the entire.
This is for the future of the overall system. They're looking down the line when they may need to provide another well, but right now they say the well field that they have, the current system can supply the water
Wells
here
1, 2, and 3.
with necessary booster pumps and the like.
Do they want you to put the infrastructure in?
We're required to put the
You're
infrastructure.
required. So you'll put it all the way in up to Parlato property?
Yeah,
No, not for the Wells field. That's
No.
all for them if and when they ever want to do something.
So they would put that in?
Yes,
And
that's
then-
all under their charge.
So you have to upgrade the pumping
We're
system or
donating the
whatever
4
else in order
acres to them,
provide-
which they don't have right now.
In order to provide water to your development, you have to upgrade the pumping systems and whatever else they need.
Yeah, on the hill site.
But you're doing nothing on the 4-acre parcel that
No.
you're deeding to them.
No, we're just providing them with the land, and oh, by the way, our clearing calculations take into account the potential clearing they may do. So we're sort of penalized, what is it, 4 acres or so, against our clearing, even if they don't, it's not likely, if you look at how they put in their well fields, it's not likely they're gonna clear entirely 4 acres.
No.
But we took into account that they could clear 100% of that against our clearing
Against your
requirements.
clearing, yeah. Okay. So the question on the Parlato property I asked. So is there going to be a restriction on landscaping of the individual homes to ensure that nitrogen calculations are kept within your 15%? And will there be a pesticide manager, or HOH be doing that?
Jessica Insulaco again. In making the calculation, the breakdown of the 15%, we actually calculated how much area on a lot could be fertilized if you take out the driveway and the footprint of the home and everything else. And we assumed that the property owners would fertilize any bit they could.
Sure.
And so we took that into account and said, okay, well, we'll take that off the top. And then that's how we got to the other amounts. So that's why there's less for common areas, less for golf. So that's, we've accounted fully for them fertilizing 100% of their lots, even though they probably won't. But we assumed that they would, just like we assumed they'll overclear. And it's on the map. I know the restriction of the,
Is that?
the 15%'s on the map.
Okay, but we have on the individual homes also, we have some determination and delineation as to
What they're assuming that it'll be all fertilized,
all fertilized.
minus the buildings and the driveway.
So how would that language read? I'm sorry.
If the 15% would apply to the overall site as opposed to the overall portions of development as opposed to the individual lots.
And is that going to be monitored by a pesticide manager of yours, out of the HOH, or?
The entire project is going to be monitored. So all these monitoring wells, so anything that's coming off the project is all part of that.
Including all these residences,
Yes.
all these homes?
Yes, so that's all part of, it's not just the golf course that's being monitored.
Right.
And so, that being said, we will have a homeowners association. There will be strict controls on architecture and development on each of these lots. And for a good portion of the project, the village homes, the so on and so forth, are all being built by our client.
May I ask a question?
Please, jump in.
So in the secret findings analysis, the fertilizer amounts they're clearly defined, but there was, on page 11, there's a line here, further, if there is any violation of said protocols, all fertilization and pesticide application activities shall halt, and the use of the golf course shall cease until such a time it can be determined that the cause of the violation and the corrective action can be identified. So my question is, actually, a couple-part question here is, which agency is going to be monitoring that? Who makes the call if golf activities and fertilizing need to cease?
So, as was indicated before, this goes to the groundwater monitoring agreement. So it starts with the groundwater monitoring plan, which second part is the agreement for the monitoring, which is going to be with the town board, hiring a consultant, just as they do on the other 2 golf courses. And there's also someone that collects and reports the testing. And then you also have a consultant who is Martin Petrovic that reviews the results and the trigger. And then if there is something that triggers, it goes back to the town and then whatever, whether it's code enforcement or planning board or somebody gets involved and says, hey, you're over the limit. But
Right.
normally, it's that consultant immediately, like I said on Sabonic, when that issue came up, the result, no sooner they had the result, Marty Petrovic contacted, it was at the time the planning director, and I think it was Kyle or whoever it was. And immediately there were calls to Sabonic, and our consultants were all over it, trying to first find the source, as that indicates, and then what to do about it.
Okay.
So it depends on what is the standard that's, being exceeded.
Right, so I guess this is for Claire then, so in the event of elevated nitrogen levels due to fertilizing, the chain of command and communication is already established, so the third-party consultant will notify planning department?
Yeah.
Who
Planning
then
director.
notify whom to cease operations?
Oh, yeah.
Is that code enforcement, is that,
That'll be in the groundwater management plan. We'll have a procedure in
They
the
will.
event that something like this happens.
Okay.
What everybody has to do.
is that
Right,
is that
the
already
the
defined, or
manager-
that's yet to be defined?
Yet to be defined, yes,
Okay.
but it's going to be using those previous ones as guidance, so we really know what the information is.
Okay.
Do we have that document?
It's going to be something that you're gonna approve, yes.
But we have it to review.
No, not yet, right?
We've drafted proposals based on, we need to get through the final year, but basically that would be a condition, but we modeled them exactly after what was done on Sabonic and the bridge.
So we could look at those as examples.
We can look at those before.
Right, exactly, because example, in like Sabonic, which I recently looked at, wanna make sure I'm doing it right here. It was a condition of your approval. At that time, the town board was the one approving the agreement. In this case, you're approving the agreement, but the town board will have to be involved because there's gonna be money exchange. There's gonna be somebody monitoring this on the behalf of the town. So, exactly how that lines up is gonna be.
So what you did on
done separate.
Sabonic is interesting, is that was exactly as Claire indicated. The town board is involved because of that financial commitment and contractual relationship between the town and the consultants doing the sampling. So but what the planning board did on Sabonic is you asked that both the agreement and the monitoring plan be incorporated into a covenant that allows further enforcement, so, and protocols. But again, the good thing is the standard that we're trying to, exceed. If you go back to the science, we're nowhere near, the mention was 10 milligrams per liter, we're at less than 1 or 2. So the standard we don't ever expect to get to, and that is what's been proven on the bridge and Sabonic so far, particularly with nitrogen. The thing that was interesting on Sabonic, you can go back, there was a portion of the property where the old house was and the septic systems for that old house, and there was a monitoring well right there. And we had, the baseline well went in, and that nitrogen that was residual from that septic kept coming up year after year after year after year. We saw it decline. And it got to a point where, actually, I think the town's consultant said, this monitoring well isn't helping us. Can you put in another one over here? And we'll keep this one and we'll just keep watching it to see that happen, but it wasn't helping as far as the actual monitoring.
Right.
And that's the sensitivity, but the good thing is
Well, that's
we've never
good.
gotten to a point of where we had to get to your question is,
Right.
well, who stops? But the authority, the town board, the code enforcement, the building inspector, stop work orders, all that authority that you have is all there.
Right.
I'm a flow chart guy, so I need to see it. That's-
So it emanates from Petrovic, is that his name? And he is yet to be engaged.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, he would be, normally he's engaged, I think technically by the town.
By the town.
Town board,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So can we talk about the phasing now?
Yes,
Okay.
we
I think-
have a new phasing plan. We actually, I don't know if you wanna talk about the access.
Oh, for
'Cause
traffic,
we do
because
have Ray
he's here.
Bias with us, and I don't wanna,
Yeah, well, let's talk about that.
yeah, and then we'll
Sure.
go to the phasing, how's that sound?
Sure.
Will we have time to talk about the structures, the development as we
We'll
relate to
come back.
ZBA decision?
Yes.
That's kind of important.
Exactly. So we got some things to talk about. Right, come up. I have a copy of this report, I sent it to you. Since then,
You can
I,
sit here, Ray.
yes.
The mics
The mic is here, so refer your voice to it.
There we
Thank
go.
you.
Long arms.
Welcome to our marathon session.
That's a marathon for me. So you have a copy of the memo?
Yep.
And just
Okay.
introduce yourself for the record.
I'm Ray DeBias, President of OK McLean Associates
Speak up, though.
in Brookhaven, New York.
So just in summary, the access that you looked at in 2019 was via what was a paper road, and then the applicant did not control that at the time. So since then, the applicant secured an easement over a parcel which has been historically farmed, not in the last 20 years, but has farm buildings on it. So they're demolishing one or two of the buildings and installing this access. The concern was that you looked at the access at the time of the previous 2019, is this the same or better? And make sure that it's safe. So you retained, the applicant provided the information, which was an update to the traffic study. And the planning board hired Ray DeBias to look at it.
Do we have a map that we can just refer to while Ray is talking? Will this map work for access?
No, it's got a portion of it.
Does anybody have? Because it's so much more helpful to be looking at something on
Right.
access.
I have an aerial.
It's a little bit
Pull that up
smaller,
pretty
but-
easy.
It's a little, I mean, it shows the whole piece,
The
but.
aerial's probably the best because it shows Lewis, it'll show Lewis Road.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's go into below it so you can see the context.
So this one shows
Yeah.
the proposed site access. This is
Yeah.
Lewis Road here.
Okay, let's, let everybody can see. Now, I think we have to, so that everybody on this board can see it, but don't block Ray's face.
I think you have a lot of criteria there.
I've been coming for 20
That's-
years.
Could you blow it up, please? I can't.
Put the cursor up.
Get your spectacles. So much I could do.
I'll try to help.
I'll do my best.
The old
So
access road was.
what's not shown here, but this is the Kioski family farm.
Okay,
Planning board approved the subdivision with building lots up in this direction.
Yeah, I remember that.
And
I remember that.
this was one of those, they sold the development rights off the farmland. But to get access to these lots up here, they had a road that sort of followed the edge of the farmland, which you can see sort of in that white, which you can see more importantly, which ended up being a mapped street on the subdivision map, paper road. Since that time, the Kioski family took advantage of the provisions of the code where a farm family was looking to sell lots. And they have, rather than the normal performance bond, a letter of credit, they have deeds posted in lieu. And so they haven't planned to develop or do anything, and that road remains entirely unimproved. From the beginning of this project, we reached out to the Kioski family with that map street, and they have come back, and the family more or less has asked a absurd amount of money to get access for that, even though we had offered to take over their requirement to improve the lots, which would have allowed them to get off of their bond, get their deeds, be able to sell their lots or build on their lots. They wouldn't accept that. They wanted that plus some host of things, and we could never come to an agreement. As a result, our clients reached out to the landowner on what was the actual Cracky farm,
oh, that's the Cracky.
and they were able to obtain an easement, which is this area here. So one private right-of-way to another private right-of-way access. And essentially, what was being asked here for Ray to do is look at the traffic issues where the location of the new access point would be.
So there's one way in and one way out in this project?
No, it's,
That's a two-way. It's
well,
the
this
only
is
entrance
here,
on that.
Yeah.
you have Spinney Road, which is an
Oh.
emergency access.
Emergency.
One of the
Kiosk is
things
off the table.
Yeah, one of the things we did from the beginning was the planning board, when this was 2005, is the whole people on Spinney Road didn't want access to this project in any way to go off of Spinney Road. So we've been honoring that since day one. So this is the primary access, it has been. So all, basically all the development would go through that.
And did we get a fire commission report on the entrance?
On the entrance, there was no issues related to the entrance. No. We have a fire
Oh,
commissioner's
that's
report.
subdivision, right.
Could you just point the two, because they're very close together, the Kioski is that green triangle there?
Yeah, right.
So, you see where this sort of, I don't know if
Yeah.
you can see it, that
That's
white,
their
which
road.
is the edge of the farm
That was
field.
the original.
That would be essentially where the Kioski mapped street would be, and it would go all the way up to.
And then
this
point
lo-
to the new location.
It's
It's
there,
right
it's on
here.
the
Right
map.
there with the oranges.
So it's, Ray could probably tell us approximately
Okay.
The
500
aerial
feet.
shows it too. so
Okay,
the
so
Kioski-
now we have a better sense.
It's
Yeah.
a decent, distance. Kiosk is only 5 lots, if I remember correctly.
Correct, 5 lots there, and then by the homestead, they had 2 more, so.
Okay.
All done.
Does that help? Did you need any more?
It's very helpful, just
Well,
leave
we got
it
the
there.
aerial now up on the screen.
Could you go over with your cursor, the proposed,
Thank you.
so I make sure that I'm
Yeah,
tracing the
It's gonna
right
go
area in my
approximately
brain?
like this.
Okay, thanks.
Coming up from,
Lewis Road.
Lewis Road, this building is being demolished.
which building?
Where her cursor is.
I guess it's in a bad state as it is, I think it's falling apart, so it's gonna.
So that's the Cracky property.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's where the new road.
Yeah, that was
And
all.
this is just an easement through it.
It is.
And what's the name of the road? I can't see it this far away, that's coming sort of down off of Lewis there?
Damascus.
Damascus.
It's
Okay,
about
thank you.
260 feet away.
Oh, but no, this road here, the cemetery.
Oh,
No, no,
no,
on the
across the
other
street
side.
is Damascus Road.
Oh, yes, this one, yeah.
Thanks.
And you can see the right-of-way of, the map right-of-way up in the upper left-hand corner.
Yeah.
That's where
That
the
was the
field
old kiosk.
road,
That was
that's
the
where
old
the
access.
access would have been.
Right.
What's happening on the Cracky farm? Is it just a landscape?
It's been nursery.
Nursery?
It's a nursery.
Landscape
And,
nursery.
and those buildings that are there are old farm buildings. None of them ever received building permits as any agricultural buildings. And as Claire indicated, one is virtually ready to fall down.
The termites are keeping it together.
Yeah, essentially.
Okay, thank you. Ray, you want to give us a
Sure.
report?
Yeah, I have 3 comments, and as Claire mentioned, we only looked at the site entrance comparison memo. We did not look at the traffic study, which was done by another consultant, or reviewed by another consultant before we got involved. So they had estimated the site distance, so in other words, either you're pulling out of the roadway and you're trying to get onto Lewis, you're looking left and you're looking right, and you want to be able to see a far enough distance so that if there's a car approaching, you have adequate time to either pull out in front of them, so that there's not a traffic safety problem. So if you're coming out and looking to the northwest along Lewis, you can see a very good distance. There's no issue there. And if you're pulling out looking to the south, I estimated that from where the stop bar would be and where a driver would be. So where the driver's head is looking to the left, there's vegetation all along that property frontage, so that needs to be cleared. The restriction pulling out and looking left is a hill crest. So cars come over a hill there, it's a slight hill, but you lose sight of them. So you want to be able to see to that.
Ray, so the comment about the vegetation, is that in the right-of-way, or are we gonna have to?
It's on their property, it looks like.
And if it's a landscaping business, they're not gonna want us to cut, they're not gonna wanna cut stuff down.
I
do
think
you,
that,
Bob,
I think if you look at the aerial, you could see that, I don't think that's part of the nursery. You can see the nursery sort of goes in a horizontal east-west, but I think where Ray is describing is along the street, along Lewis Road, which I think is more successional field growth, so.
Is it along the south here?
Yeah, down, right,
Right down to the end.
right, Vickers is, come the other way, come keep.
Yeah,
No, this way, the other way.
I think that's
Right about-
manageable,
a little bit
where our
further down
client
towards
could
the-
talk
yeah, right
to the
about there,
owner
maybe.
and take care of clearing in that.
So if it's outside the right of way,
I
you're
think
gonna
we
have
have.
to persuade,
we-
work
yeah.
with the homeowner to move
Yeah, I
some
think we
shrubs
would
or-
be able to, I don't think that they're find that of any value and want to keep it, but I think we would be able to talk to them and make sure that could be complied with.
That could be moved back, because I will say, you know, okay, my background, you know, when you trim back shrubs, they grow back the next year. So,
remove them.
I think
Yeah.
moving it back or something to make sure it's not gonna grow right back in.
Absolutely, I think what we do is to the extent identify, you know, how much has to go back and make sure it's done in the manner that you described.
How wide a road is it? Driveway? It's 2 ways, right?
The access in, yeah, is the standard town road
Standard?
width, yes. At the entrance.
Should be rolled into your access agreement, a maintenance agreement, you know, that gives you the right to
Well,
maintain.
I think what my expectation is you're gonna want us to provide a plan of some sort, and that's incorporated into your performance bond, with the road entrance.
Is that still the same property as down to the south there, where the shrubs are? Is it still the property, the cracky property or whatever? You could negotiate as part of putting the driveway in there?
It looks like, because I see the white tax map,
Tax map,
tax
coming down.
parcel.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to go down on the aerial, but to be clear, but, you know, whatever was the cracky property, we have the ability to
Well, there's
talk to
another,
those owners.
Right.
there are other white lines around something to
Because there's some
the-
house parcels that come down, and then you have Cemetery Road. So you can't see it on this, but.
Is that the full area? Claire?
No, it's not, it's just a part of the access. Do you want the full area?
See,
I don't know if I have access.
see where this
Maybe zoom
wooded,
out a little bit.
this
Yeah.
wooded portion,
Yeah,
so the cracky property
Oh,
comes
okay.
down like this, and then there's these two houses down here. So only that portion, which is cracky, but which is probably the vegetation that we're talking about.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Ray, but the problem with vegetation is close to the driveway. When you get a couple 100 feet down the road, the vegetation would not be as much of an issue if it was
Correct.
closer to the driveway.
Correct, it's almost like a triangle. It'd be deeper where the driver is, and then as you're looking more toward the lane, so you're looking at a, almost, it's a triangular thing almost.
It might be
You're
the
looking
first
down the
50
hypotenuse
or
of the triangle.
100 feet or something like that.
Yeah, it would have to probably be laid out from where, a little diagram of where the car is, where the stop bar is, where the driver's head is. I think it's 12 foot back from the stop bar typically.
It's not a couple 100 yards down the road. I
dotted
mean,
line.
you don't have to, you wouldn't anticipate trimming.
You know, you're looking to the Hillcrest, which is about 750 feet away, so, you know, maybe you're halfway, you know, in the clearing. And again, it gets closer to the road as you get further away from the driveway.
Okay.
was one of the requests of you, Ray, to also look at construction vehicles and the actual building out of this and where that's going to be and if this is sufficient? No.
No.
No, only what was in the Nelson and Pope's memo on the site access.
Because we're going to have to discuss that maybe as part of the phasing or this, or I don't know.
Construction management plan, that is part of what you need to look at. That's part of
Part of
what's in the
phasing?
secret. And so, yes, you'll have to take.
But Ray, you are recommending a left turn lane. Can you?
Yeah,
when you
that's
come into the
number
south,
2.
right?
You're jumping
Yeah.
ahead.
Okay. Just in case, yeah.
But what you're saying, we're gonna definitely talk about that.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Okay, second comment. We actually, in the first comment, we note that it, just from walking along the roadway, at
It's
a time when
dangerous.
traffic is not heavy, that I think, you know, we have a radar gun, but I didn't bring it, and it looks like cars are up to 50 miles an hour going down that roadway when the volume is light.
Those are the slow pokes.
And when I did make the observations, it was, I think, October 26th. maybe?
After season.
And it was actually, on that day, we know how traffic detours off Sunrise Highway when it's backed up past Route 24 and even further east. So vehicles check on the traffic and then they dodge out at a certain point. Lewis Road, Route 104 to Lewis Road is a route to take you down to Montauk Highway or continue east on Old Country Road. So on that particular day, there wasn't much of a backup. It didn't even reach Route 24. So it wasn't a good time to see heavy traffic coming southeastbound on Lewis, but it was a good time to look at how fast vehicles were going because the traffic was lighter.
Yeah.
So I just guesstimated that traffic was about 50 miles an hour. In the first comment, it doesn't matter because you need to see you want to see 700. The clearing will enable you to see to the hillcrest. In the second comment, we're trying to optimize safety at the driveway entrance to make sure there's no safety problems, or chance for an accident. So we actually looked at, considered the 50 miles an hour speed as the design speed that you would want to design for the vehicles on Lewis. And then we did, if it skips a page past the graphs, we looked at the need for a left turn lane at that location. And now the left turn volume
Lewis
is
Road.
on Lewis to turn into the site. The volume is not very heavy, but there's a lot of opposing traffic. So AASHTO, which is the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, has a standard design guide for roadways and all types of roadways, rural areas, urban areas, various types of roadways, from freeways all the way down to local roads. So they used it for item 1, we used it for item 2, and looking at the volumes, even though the left turns going in are light, the opposing traffic is relatively heavy. There's a chart in there, and when you look at the chart, it says that a left turn lane is warranted. So that's what we're recommending there. So a left turn lane for vehicles slowing down and turning left and turning into the site is recommended. So the road would most likely need to be widened to enable that lane to be fit in, because right now it has 2 lanes and narrow shoulders. So you need a whole additional lane.
So you're talking about deceleration lane, right? To get
Well,
in.
it's a left turn lane, which is alongside the through lane. So it's a typical
Different from what I'm
intersection.
thinking. I'm thinking of the Parish Art Museum where they have that great
Deceleration
But they
lane.
have.
deceleration lane.
Coming
that
the
you
other
can-
way.
On the
it's
right-hand
not-
side.
On the
Right
right-hand
hand
side,
side.
it's so
Just the-
easy to
this-
get in. Without that, it would be
Yeah.
tough.
So we're recommending that lane be put in, and what that does too, to improve safety, if somebody stops there and they're heading southeast, they stop to turn left, they've got their traffic signal, their turn signal on to turn left, they're stopped. The through traffic can't get past them.
Yeah.
So you have stops that normally wouldn't occur.
Right.
So to get them out of the way and let the through traffic pass and avoid any rear end accidents or the potential for rear end accidents, a short left turn lane. It doesn't have to be very long, but it needs to be put in.
Approximately how many feet would you need to?
We're probably talking maybe 75 feet max, which would store 3 vehicles.
Right.
They have to calculate that based on number of vehicles per hour, and then there's a factor of safety, which is usually twice that number. And then 25 feet per vehicle is normally the length that's allowed for.
Is there enough property right of way there to establish?
It would be along that property, which I guess they would have to, again, talk to the current owner.
Yeah.
Now, what that does is too, that would probably have some widening on the south side,
Yes.
where we were just talking about the tree clearing. So some of the trees would probably go
Right.
because of the left turn lane as well.
Is that a town road?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that would have to be worked
Lewis
out
is
with
town.
the highway department, right?
Mhm.
And along those same lines, because I know there's been flooding issues along here, and Claire, I presume this may have been addressed early on, but is there drainage at that intersection being planned?
Oh, yeah, there's drainage, yeah.
Okay, good.
So, so that's the traffic coming northeast to southeast, you're looking up to get that left turn lane in. If you're doing improvements at that location, is there enough traffic going the other direction? And I know it's a high-speed road, that you do a still plane to turn right as well?
Right turn lane?
Very,
Acceleration.
again, to get
Right.
people off, turning. because same
We didn't
thing.
recommend it, the volume is not very
Okay.
heavy, and in that case, it's not like the left-turning vehicles who have to stop
Correct.
to look for oncoming traffic. There's
They
no need to stop. You make your turn uncontested, really.
But
But
seasonally, you're going to have, if all those homes are occupied, there's going to be an increase in traffic of people getting back to their units.
Yeah, we looked at the traffic volumes that they had projected from the traffic study. So we didn't comment on that. We just took those as, because that study had been reviewed. And again, that study looks at the peak hour. So in a retirement community, a lot of times the trips are after the morning peak. So you're not necessarily going out, a lot of people going out first thing in the morning, they go out maybe later in the day to avoid the traffic, one reason. And because they're maybe making multiple trips to various places during the day.
So can I ask who reviewed that for us? Who reviewed that traffic study?
For the planning?
Yes, and did we ever see it?
Traffic was not, transportation was not something you looked at in 2019, that was the town board.
And so do we have any information on it?
That was reviewed by the town's consultant.
Right, but that's
I'm
the
sorry,
PDD.
The B-Lang?
Yeah.
Oh, B-Lang,
He
then.
looked at everything.
That was part of your traffic analysis?
Is the gatehouse or what entrance, is that going to be manned? And so could there be a queue of cars while they have to identify themselves or something?
yeah, that's set some distance back in the property, right?
The gatehouse is up.
Way
Yeah,
up.
okay.
Way up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually
That's-
north, and it will be manned.
Okay. But that'll be on that private road?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so, and
I
then.
just want to cover that last one.
Yep.
There's just something we looked at because we know in the morning peak hour, when there's a lot of traffic coming off Sunrise Highway, that at the intersections on either side of the railroad tracks, which are southeast of the site, that there are delays for vehicles on the side roads. So Old Country Road's on the north side of the railroad track, west of Lewis, and then it jumps over to the east side. So you have a lot of vehicles both coming off Sunrise Highway, coming down Lewis, who want to make a left either on Old Country as they cross the tracks or continue south to Montauk Highway. When that volume's heavy in the morning, there's a backup of traffic on Old Country because it's a stop sign and those vehicles can't get out very easily sometimes. And they've got traffic coming from both directions, actually. And then you also have the street on the south side of the track, which is...
Box Tree?
Thank you, I always forget the name of that.
I got lots of complaints from that.
Yeah, it's very difficult for them to get out. So we looked at, should this development do anything there? And based on the amount of traffic that they have assigned in the peak hour, it's less than 5% of the traffic at that intersection. So based on that magnitude or that traffic generation, I didn't feel like there's any need. I didn't think they should be responsible for anything there because it's not a significant volume increase. So that was the gist of comment number 3.
And just as a point of history, the town did do a speed limit study on Lewis Road in about 2007. As a result, lowered it from, I believe it was 45 to 40 in the kind of upper portion, and lowered it to 35. And I think Spinney Road was where the division was between the 40 and the 35. So I don't know if cars go faster now than they did in 2007, but there is some speed data in our town files.
So why do two-lane road, people will go as fast as it allows?
Right.
Do you think, Tom, placing a stop sign at that, just before that on the north side, coming down Lewis Road, would allow those right-hand turns?
I mean, Ray would be the professional, but I can't see justification for a stop sign on Lewis Road.
Sometimes that creates more problems than it
Creates
solves.
traffic.
Well,
At least it creates a pause where the Old Country Road. Two cars come, one car should turn right.
Yeah, but then whenever you put a stop sign in, you create the possibility for a rear-end accident, because vehicles have to stop. So they're not, they're coming up to a condition where they have to put the brakes on and stop. You have a lot of turning traffic there. It's a little difficult, because, you could allow the side road to come out, so vehicles come out one by one, if it's an all-way stop. But then going northbound over the tracks.
North, you wouldn't want a stop sign, no.
can't
I'm
put-
thinking just,
Yeah, that gets a little tricky.
I'm just thinking about the southbound, allowing those Old Country Road cars, everyone pulls up to a stop, one vehicle stops, the other can turn, then the next vehicle goes sort of orderly.
Yeah, it quarters out.
We had looked at stop signs at Old Country in Lewis, and at that time, 5 years ago or whatever, was not meeting the criteria. As Ray could explain, you look at accidents, you look at line of sight, and you do want to keep the traffic flowing on your primary road.
Right.
So,
Yeah, the other problem with that is, what do you do northbound? Because you're not gonna put a stop sign
No,
right
no.
at the tracks. But if you don't put a stop sign, people, let's say, coming out on Old Country and they're making the right turn, right, they're heading east to cross the tracks. They look to their left, they see a stop sign, they see vehicles stop. They assume that maybe if they want to turn left out of there, that, everybody stops here. I see 2 stop signs on opposite legs of the intersection, so it must be an all-way stop, even though there's not a little.
It's not.
So they pull out right in front of another vehicle that doesn't, crossing the tracks, that doesn't have a stop sign.
Right.
So there's the danger of
Yeah.
that. That's,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I don't know, just for information, because I asked you a question about what the traffic report was, and in the Lang report, it said that the said traffic impact analysis was peer-reviewed by the town consultant, AKRF. I don't know what that means, peer-reviewed.
Yes.
Is that a
So they-
referral?
Yeah,
Do we-
AKRF was the town's reviewer.
Then it says an operational traffic monitoring program will be required to be prepared and submitted with the site plan to confirm that traffic circulation at the intersection of the proposed access road and Lewis Road is operating acceptably as identified in the traffic analysis.
That is
So I
a
don't know.
condition of, that was a condition of the approval. That is a condition of your approval still. So you're gonna have an access management plan that will be part of this
Okay,
project
but-
and be monitored.
Was Ray advised of all this? Did he see any of that
No,
information?
I'm focusing on the project before you. That is a condition of the approval, that there should be an access management plan. That is something else.
Okay, how
They
come-
have to provide it, and then you will have someone who will review it, and then that will be part of a performance bond that they may have to do additional improvements if it does indeed function not as we expect, which is as designed as he's recommending now, but something else comes up. Like just,
So
there's
does
a
this-
line of cars and we need a bigger, left-hand turn lane or something like
So
that.
do we have the AKRF report somewhere?
That is part of the record of the DEIS and FEIS.
Can it be extracted and sent to us?
Yes.
Thank you.
There, any work on the town right away they can't do. It has to be contracted to the town.
It would be part of, the highway department would be involved, yep.
That kind of work, Dennis, is typically with a curb cut access,
Yeah.
usually is something that the highway department gives you a permit for. If it was something more than extensive than the curb cut access, then, yeah, there is a question of off-site improvements, your ability to impose that, as well as how and where the town assures the work is done in accordance with the standard. But this is a typical entrance, just like the county, if this was a county road, wants sidewalks along the entire length and things like that. That's a standard curb cut procedure.
But I think we were talking about road widening to accommodate that turn.
Yeah, I think that's all in place. If the road has to be widened, it would be along the northerly part normally, along our property. I think that's what Ray had indicated, if that's necessary. But I just want to point out is that two things. One is, it seems that Ray's report is referencing the 2016 study, but there was a further 2018. So we want to make sure he gets a copy of that. And then our engineers will review this and be able to respond, because we just got this literally just like when you got it, so.
Any other questions for Ray? So, because I think we have to close this work
Yeah, we
session
can
and
close
go
it.
into regular session. We'll continue on, but any more questions for Ray?
No.
Terry, thank
you
you.
as
Ray's
always.
hanging around, right, I think.
Yeah, he's hanging around.
Yeah,
He's got,
okay,
he's got
good.
one more at least.
Oh, okay.
That's-
Can I have a motion to close the work
Motion to
session?
close.
Motion by Dennis, second by
Second.
Kate, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, 6 in favor. The work session is closed. And we're going to go immediately into the regular.